Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show, live on Rumble, where facts come first and where news is done right. And we begin with the big breaking news on trade, where the U.S. and China announced a sharp reduction in reciprocal tariffs, including a 90-day pause. Here's President Trump earlier today. Watch.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the larger structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs because they don't want to pay 25, 50, or 100% tariffs, so they're moving them back to the United States. I spoke to Tim Cook this morning, and he's going to, I think, even up his numbers, $500 billion. He's going to be building a lot of plants in the United States for Apple, and we look forward to that. I really do look forward to that. But the talks in Geneva were very friendly. The relationship is very good. We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us. And the relationship is very, very good. I'll speak to President Xi maybe at the end of the week. We have some other things we're doing.
But the big breaking news, it didn't stop there, because President Trump also announced historic action on lowering the cost of drug prices through most favored nation status, meaning drug companies can't charge Americans any more than the lowest price they charge abroad. Take a look.
Deal. I'm just going off the Truth Social post. It says, it's a long one, but he says, I'm pleased to announce that today, the White House at 9 o'clock will be signing one of the most consequential executive orders ever. They will be reducing pharmaceuticals by about 80%. Essentially, we are going to pay less than the country that's paying the least for pharmaceuticals from here on in. How does that work?
First of all, it cannot be overstated how big of a deal this executive order that President Trump will be signing in a couple of hours is for American families, and especially our seniors who have been ripped off by very large and rich pharmaceutical companies. The United States of America is less than 5% of the world's population, yet we purchase 75% of Big Pharma's profits. We pay an astronomical amount in comparison to other countries around the world. So the president is signing an executive order today that is going to implement most favored nations drug pricing and is going to reduce the cost of drugs in this country by more than half at least. America is going to pay a better rate and a fairer rate to the rest of the world. That's what the American people deserve. This is huge news. And also, I will add, we know that healthcare costs and drug prices were the #1 driver of Biden inflation. So not only are we bringing those down, but we are ending Biden inflation once and for all.
And that was followed up by HHS Secretary RFK Jr., who made it clear that no one should have to choose between getting better and going bankrupt. Watch.
Some critics of this who say, look, these are price controls, almost neo-socialist price controls on drug prices. What's your answer to that?
My answer is it's getting rid of price controls, because the European governments have told the drug companies, here is the maximum price we're going to pay. We're not going to pay any more. If you don't give us this price, you can't sell it in our country. That is the epitome of a price control. President Trump is returning the marketplace to this and saying, look, we're going to have a global marketplace. We're going to pay the same thing in one country as we're going to pay in the other. And we're going to stop subsidizing healthcare costs in Europe. So we are subsidizing socialized medicine in Europe on the backs of U.S. patients who are going bankrupt to pay these prices. The #1 cause of bankruptcy in this country now is healthcare costs.
Yeah.
And we have all these Americans who, we're getting them better, but then they are bankrupt and they have no money in order to subsidize price controls in Europe. So President Trump is going to get rid of the price controls.
And now, earlier today, President Trump left Washington for the Middle East to strengthen ties with the Gulf states on what will be a 4-day trip with stops in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. Joining me now with the very latest from our nation's capital, Daily Signal White House correspondent Elizabeth Mitchell. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being back on the program.
Thanks so much for having me back.
All right. Well, first of all, the president today announced some major progress on trade talks. What is the very latest? And, what are some of the signs that this is heading in the right direction?
I think that we know there is a lot of progress being made in this area. Like you said, we've got that first deal with the UK last week, very historic. We know the president has a long history with the UK. He is very close to the leadership there. And so it was great to see that kicking off the deals, reached a historic agreement with China, as you said, for a pause, a lowering of these very high tariffs down to, I believe, 80% with China. And so definitely a step in the right direction, showing that these tariffs are having the intended effects of getting countries to come to the negotiating table.
And this follows the UK deal signed last week. Are there any indications that this will be sort of a domino effect? There does seem to be a level of optimism inside the White House and, quite frankly, from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
Bessent has been saying for weeks now that countries are lined up to make a deal. At one point, I think he said he had about 70 countries calling him looking to make deals. It was just a matter of time to make sure they got a deal that worked best for both countries, a deal to make sure the U.S., as they always say, is not getting ripped off by these foreign countries. So I would imagine that, like you said, the U.K. reaching a deal would serve as a catalyst for other countries coming to the table.
And how does this all relate to the budget reconciliation talks on Capitol Hill? Where is GOP leadership on all of this?
I think that this week, the budget reconciliation conversation, of course, is going to be at the top of the news. There are so many different provisions, but I think what we really can see budget reconciliation as the potentially only opportunity to get President Trump's agenda through Congress, because it needs less votes than a regular bill would. And so this is a great opportunity to get his historic tax cuts across, great opportunity to secure the border and just solidify his agenda in law to the most extent that congressional Republicans can do.
The president told you last week that he's going to be rapidly nominating more federal judges. What else did he say, and how does it relate to the adjudication of proceedings of illegal immigrants?
He said that he has, of course, seen so much judicial activism in his term. There are numerous federal judges across the country seeking to stop his agenda. And he said in the federal judges that he is going to appoint, he's going to make sure that he's choosing people who aren't going to make sure there's a deportation trial for every single illegal immigrant, because that would cause it to take years, many years. It would never happen, getting all the illegal immigrants out of the country, if a long trial had to be gone through for every single illegal immigrant to be removed. And so President Trump said that he would nominate judges rapidly. He told me that last Sunday night, and he did. On Tuesday, he nominated 5 federal judges. And so he certainly is seeing this as a priority. There are less openings in this term than he had to fill in his first term. So we are going to see a little bit of a slower pace just by nature of the number of opportunities that he has. But he is moving rapidly considering how many spaces he does have to fill. And I think that seeing the way that these judicial activists have affected his agenda is really going to inspire him on another level. He did great appointments on his first term, but this is really going to inspire him to choose people who he knows are going to uphold the rule of law instead of pushing an agenda.
And what has been the response from the White House? Stephen Miller floated suspending habeas corpus.
So the White House, as you said, is just looking for ways to continue on with President Trump's agenda of deporting illegal immigrants, particularly illegal illegal immigrant criminals, this is an issue that the vast majority of Americans are on board with the Trump administration with. Very few Americans want illegal immigrant criminals to remain on the streets of their country, risking their safety. And so the Trump administration is exploring all different options. After the Supreme Court ruled they cannot use the Alien Enemies Act to facilitate deportations, they are exploring other options. But I think we could see an appeal there as well.
And when it comes to, lowering drug costs, this was big, breaking news as well. You saw HSS Secretary and Mehmet Oz and the president on this. I think it's a very big deal because I know a lot of families that suffer and elderly because they can't afford their prescriptions. They have to choose between feeding their kids, feeding themselves, or getting their prescription medication. So when it comes to lowering the drug costs, what does this order actually say? And what are some of the inside details?
That's a great question. This, as you said, is a very big announcement that the president made, big executive order signed today to reduce the cost of prescription drug prices immediately. This is supposed to have effects as soon as possible. So the way this works is the country with the lowest price for a drug, that's the price that pharmaceutical companies will be required to sell that drug at in America. The president has said that these costs of production, of research, of making these drugs is largely being put on American consumers. Even though we only have 5% of the population, we're carrying a large percent of the price of formulating these drugs. And so this goes along with his larger push to stop the United States from being ripped off by foreign countries. And so I think this order makes a lot of sense with his agenda in his second term, as well as actions that he took in his first term, which were pretty similar to this most favored nation policy.
And what's been the response from Democrats? For years, they have claimed, to champion lowering drug costs. Do they still feel that way?
Of course, they all can agree that the one thing that unites the Democrats is opposing anything President Trump does. But there is some disagreement about this executive order, even amongst conservatives, about if this is the best way to go about lowering drug costs, because there are some concerns that it could reduce competition and innovation. But the Trump administration feels very confident it will not have that effect, and that the market, the economy of the drug market is what is broken, and that we need a reset for this, and then we can go back to the more natural way about it. They're not seeing that as price fixing, but people on both sides of the political spectrum are saying that if this is price fixing, that could have a negative effect on competition and innovation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting, right? You bring up such a salient point that they love championing and getting behind anything that Trump does. Say, oh, we're against it, we're against this. Cure for cancer, oh, we're against it. Oh, lowering prescription drug costs, oh, we're against it. Like, it's just unbelievable. Cleaning up crime in cities and metropolitan centers across, the country. No, we don't like that either. We're not for public safety. It just makes no sense. They lose so much credibility, and that's why they lose elections. And we see it here time and time again. These are like bipartisan issues about quality of life and lowering prescription, drug costs.
Absolutely. I think that's really the reason the Democrats are in such extreme disarray, is that they don't have a common message, a mission. The only thing that they have that they're working towards that's their common ground is just challenging everything the president does. And at some point, the voters are going to be tired of that. And I think that they already are. Polls are showing Democrats are very unpopular. There is not a clear party leader because, of course, the majority of Americans did vote to elect President Trump. And they don't want to hear from the Democrat Party just, Trump's terrible all the time, and here's how we're fighting Trump. They want to hear some positive ideas, things they're actually doing instead of things they're just opposing.
And what about on the issue of healthcare more broadly? What else do we know about the priorities and defunding Planned Parenthood, which has come up again?
That's a great question. So the Energy and Commerce Committee turned in their markups of the reconciliation bill, and it includes cuts to the abortion giant Planned Parenthood. And the way it does this is it says that an organization which participates in facilitating child sex changes cannot receive taxpayer funding. And Planned Parenthood, a recent live action undercover report showed, is giving out these hormone treatments to teenagers. We know these can have extremely negative sterilizing effects on teenagers, harm growth and development, have long-term effects that they're going to be dealing with throughout their lives, even though they may not be aware of it at the time. And so we know that Planned Parenthood is giving these out. And so that's really what House Republicans are targeting, is making sure taxpayer funding is not going towards these gender transition procedures, in line with President Trump's executive order saying that we don't want any taxpayer support, no government support to these irreversible procedures.
Wow, it's troubling. It's disturbing. And you're right. Like you focus on the term, irreversible procedures. That's what we're talking about. And you're talking about children here. It's child abuse. They're not able, their brains aren't even fully formed to be able to make these kind of decisions, and it's being foisted upon them for political reasons. And, you're supposed to be able to rely on your parents and trust them the most. So it's quite disturbing that this is the state of affairs, but I guess it's a very good sign in the right direction that President Trump is making sure that that is not the case. It's one thing if you're older and you have your parents with you and you're doing your, due diligence on everything. But some of these children that this is happening to are far too young to be able to be going through something like this. And it's very disturbing to me. Just get your thoughts on that.
You're completely right. I think that a common argument we hear is that if someone under 18 isn't old enough to decide to get a tattoo, they certainly should not be old enough to decide to cut off healthy body parts or take medicines, which could potentially make them infertile later in life or cause them bone issues, various other pain throughout their lives. And so I think that really is the crux of the argument, that while even though we know biologically no one can really change their sex. Sex is given by God at birth and no one can change it. It's in every part of one's DNA. Adults, if they want to harm their bodies, they can make that decision. But children really do not have the mental capacity to make this decision. And that's really proven by these detransitioners that we see, these kids who went to the doctor, they were feeling a little uncomfortable with their bodies just because they were tweens or teenagers. And the doctor told them that the only way that they could be happy again is to undergo these medical procedures. And then they wake up a couple years later, they've potentially gotten their breast removed, they've taken these hormone treatments, which have these negative effects that we've been talking about, and they realize they've made a huge mistake. And they can go back and live according to their biological sex again, but their bodies are never going to be the same, and they're never going to know what it was like to have a normal, non-medicalized childhood or adult life.
How would you describe the relationship between the president, the speaker, and Senate leadership? Because we see them all kind of like working together in concert right now. Is everyone on the same page?
The majorities in the House and the Senate are both pretty slim, so it's not going to be easy to pass President Trump's agenda. That's why this reconciliation bill is so important. I think that they're meeting regularly, and it's really a big emphasis from the Trump administration on all of the policies to not just sign an executive order or a presidential memo, but to make sure that these policies are being established by Congress, because that's how they're going to have an effect that would last beyond the Trump administration if a Republican doesn't win in 2028.
Yeah, and what do you think about that? How are we looking? I know, jumping ahead, but midterms, 2028. I mean, based on sort of the litmus test of what's happening thus far after the first 100 and going now into the second 100 days, how do you see it?
I think that there are, of course, different metrics by which the American people are judging the Trump administration. I think that the majority of voters are happy with efforts to secure the border, deport illegal immigrant criminals. I think most people are happy with the common sense measures like getting men out of women's sports, that type of thing. But I do think that a lot of Americans do judge the presidency based on the economy. And so we'll have to see how the economy is going with these tariffs. I think that that could be a big determiner of how the midterms will go and how the 2028 presidential election could go. But of course, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And as we've been discussing, more countries are coming to the table to make deals. So we could see tariffs have less of an effect on the economy in upcoming weeks.
Okay, and this is something fun I know that our viewers and listeners are always curious about. Can you take us kindly inside the briefing room? How is new media being treated? Because there's been a lot of transformations there and new policies and procedures. What stands out to you as a reporter, as a journalist, about how the White House press office is running things, like the juxtaposition from before in the previous administration to now under President Trump and Vice President Vance?
I've talked to reporters who were in the briefing room under the Biden administration, even under the first Trump administration, and they're saying that the mood in the room is just different than ever before. It is so packed, truly standing room only. Everyone is just squeezed together, so excited to attend these briefings. And something that's been really great is the way that they've changed the pool rotation so that new media is allowed to be on pool. That's the group of reporters that gets to kind of follow the president around for the day and ask him questions. And so having a new media slot on pool has been an incredible opportunity for me to get to travel with the president, get to go in the Oval Office and ask him questions. And so I'm very thankful that they've expanded the reach of what the media means to include alternative media who are beyond, those two front rows in the briefing room, that more people are getting the opportunity to ask questions and cover the presidency.
It's pretty exciting, isn't it? I know, look at her smile.
Sure is.
She's the best. We love her.
Yes, it sure is. I'm very thankful to be there.
And he promised he was going to do that. And in fact, he did deliver, because when there was this whole, warfare going on, lawfare, weaponization of the justice system, all of the above, it was really tough because people had to go to alternative sites and media outlets and were very respectable and, had a lot of veracity and credibility to be able to get the truth and the information, versus the hyperbole and fake news and ridiculousness and lack of journalistic standards from some of the legacy media, mainstream media. So what do you, what's the atmosphere like in there? I know personally your experience, but what do you see sort of happening around you with the other outlets and now have a seat at the table?
I think the Trump administration was more willing to put up with legacy media in the first term, but after 8 years of seeing the extremely hostile and unfair treatment, I think the Trump administration really realized that we just don't need to be dealing with this anymore. There's other options, other people we can talk to who are going to represent us more fairly. You see every headline, it never reports what's happening fairly. It's always saying Trump said this, which is wrong because of this, that kind of thing. And so I think they really grew weary of that kind of biased reporting. And so it's great to see more alternative outlets in the room. And that's not just conservative alternative outlets. I think that's really important to note, that they're letting in Axios, Notice, Semaphore, some more left-leaning independent outlets that just aren't your regular legacy outlets are all getting a seat at the table to cover the White House.
And, how does it work kind of on a daily basis on who gets to ask questions? What's the strategy? Is there a protocol as it relates to that?
Yeah, so these briefings, something that's a big change from Karine Jean-Pierre is not only are we having them once a week, but Caroline is not just calling on the legacy media outlets, maybe the CNN, the MSNBC in the front row. She really does call on a wide variety of reporters. Sometimes she'll call on someone and say, "Oh, it's good to see you here. I've never seen you before." So she really is spreading out across the room who she's calling on, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, it is. And she's doing a really great job. And seeing there, she's a new mother. So happy Mother's Day to her, and she's sitting there just trying to feed her baby and do all of this. I mean, total rock star. But speaking of rock stars, that's you for sure. We're big fans of yours. You're a fabulous guest, intelligent, well-informed. So everybody, tell them where they can find you, follow you, etc.
Thank you so much. You can follow me on X at @TheElizMitchell and read my work on thedailysignal.org.
All right, fantastic. Elizabeth Mitchell, thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be back.
All right, be well. And coming up, we're going to bring you President Trump's remarks from his historic press conference with HHS Secretary RFK Jr. earlier today. And in the meantime, also be sure to check out the good folks at the 1775 Coffee Company. Here it is. There you go. There we go. We talk about it all the time. Don't compromise on taste, quality, or your values. And 1775 coffee is brewed to perfection, crafted with precision, and built on patriotism. The farm-to-cup process means there is quality, authenticity, and sustainability from start to finish. All the beans are ethically and exclusively single-sourced. So please, why not? Try 1775 coffee today. Go to 1775coffee.com/KG, and you will receive 15% off of your first order. But don't stop there, because free speech is under attack. But Rumble refuses to back down. We have always believed in empowering independent voices, and to Rumble, it matters more than ever. We are excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and creators. And it's more than a subscription, it is a stand for free speech. Your voice matters. Join Rumble Premium. Let's do it today. For a limited time, you can get $10 off an annual plan. Just use promo code KG10. So just visit rumble.com/premium/KG10 and claim your discount today. Again, that's rumble.com/premium/KG10. So just take a moment to appreciate the progress and the success of real, genuine, and authentic leadership. Cutting new deals on trade, securing the border, lowering drug prices, protecting Americans at home and abroad, and so much more. We must protect our children, protect the most vulnerable, and build a brighter future for the patriotic and freedom-loving Americans all across this beautiful country. Please be sure to download the Rumble app, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, like and share, and tell all your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And please also be sure to follow me across all platforms: X, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Don't miss Don Jr.'s big show tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern. Stay tuned to Rumble for all the very latest breaking news coverage, please. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again very soon. God bless. And now, here's President Trump.
Great things happening. It's been a very strong week and a very strong weekend. Before we begin, let me say a few words about the historic events that took place over the last few days. On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons. And they were going at it hot and heavy, and it was seemingly not going to stop. And I'm very proud to let you know that the leadership of India and Pakistan was unwavering, powerful, but unwavering in both cases, and having these, they really were, from the standpoint of having the strength and the wisdom and fortitude to fully know and to understand the gravity of the situation. And we helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And they did it for a lot of reasons, but trade is a big one. We're going to do a lot of trade with Pakistan. We're going to do a lot of trade with India. We're negotiating with India right now. We're going to be soon negotiating with Pakistan. And we stopped the nuclear conflict. I think it could have been a bad nuclear war. Millions of people could have been killed, so I'm very proud of that. I also want to thank Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio for their work and efforts. They worked very hard on that. We also, as you know, created a situation where the Houthis, for the first time ever, have ceased firing, and they've let it be known that they're not going to be firing at American ships anymore, not going to be firing at Americans anymore. This was a heavy barrage that lasted for approximately 50 days. And as you know, they've been in war essentially for forever. But over the last 10 years, they've been very difficult for other countries. Nobody was able to do what we did. But they stopped, and we take their word for it. Their surrogates and them directly said, we don't want to do this anymore. And so we were satisfied with that. In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue in the larger structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that. or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs because they don't want to pay 25, 50, or 100% tariffs, so they're moving them back to the United States. I spoke to Tim Cook this morning, and he's going to, I think, even up his numbers, $500 billion. He's going to be building a lot of plants in the United States for Apple, and we look forward to that. I really do look forward to that. But the talks in Geneva were very friendly. The relationship is very good. We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us. And the relationship is very, very good. I'll speak to President Xi maybe at the end of the week. We have some other things we're doing. But one of the biggest things that we're doing, and I don't know if people realize this, but we made a great deal with China, great trade deal. But it was a much bigger deal originally, and then they canceled it right in the last day. Some of you faces I remember were there when that happened. I remember you. And we had a deal where they opened up their country to trade with the United States. And they took that away at the last moment, and then I canceled the whole thing. And then 6 months later, we ended up doing a smaller deal. But it was a big deal. It was $50 billion worth of product that they were going to purchase from our farmers, et cetera. And we agreed to that. People thought it was 15 because they were doing 15. We made it 50 because I misunderstood the 15. I thought I said, you got to get 50. Because when I asked, if you remember the story, when I asked, what are we doing with them? My Secretary of Agriculture at the time, Sonny Perdue, said, sir, it's about 15 billion and we're asking for 15. And I thought he said 50. So I said, so they came back with the deal at 15. And I said, no way, I want 50 because you said 50. They said, sir, we didn't say that. Anyway, bottom line, I said, go back and ask for 50. And they gave us 50. And they were honoring the deal. And we would call them up a lot for the corn and for the wheat and for everything. They were honoring the deal. And then when Biden got in, they no longer honored the deal. There was nobody to call. I would call on an average of once every 2 weeks to say, come on, you have to speed it up a little bit. And our farmers were doing great. I said to them, buy more land and bigger tractors, if you remember. That's what happened. But the deal was a very good deal. But the best part of the deal was that we opened up China. China agreed to open itself up to American business to go in. And it would have been a great thing, I think, for China. They would be able to see things that they haven't seen. They would be able to buy products that they had never been able to buy. Would have been great for American business. I think it would have brought unity between China, better unity between China and the United States. And the bottom line is that they canceled it the last day. We were all set to sign it, and then I went a little bit angry. I got a little angry. I said they canceled the deal. The deal was done. It was all ready to be signed, and people went over. They came back to me, sir, they don't want to sign the opening up China. Well, the biggest thing that we're discussing is the opening up China, and they've agreed to do that. But it's going to take a while to paper it. You know, that's not the easiest thing to paper. But that's the single, I think, to me, some people would disagree. Some people would say we're getting a lot of money with tariffs or whatever. But, you know, especially when you add what we already have. Because remember, we're already getting the 50% on steel and different things. That's not included in these numbers. So you can add that. But the biggest thing to me is the opening up. It would be, I think it would be fantastic for our businesses if we could go in and compete with China. It would be a lot of jobs for China. It would be, I think, at a time when they can frankly use the jobs. And that's what we're talking about. So that's a very, very important element to add. So when Scott, I watched him speak the other day, and I think he didn't want to say it, but I said, it's okay to say it. Look, if we don't get it, we don't get it. But if we don't get it, it won't be a positive thing. But if we do get it, I think it's maybe the most important thing to happen. Because if you think about it, we opened up our country to China. They come, we don't, I mean, they have very few restrictions. And they didn't open their country to us. Never made sense to me. It's not fair. And they've agreed to open China, fully open China. And I think it's going to be fantastic for China. I think it's going to be fantastic for us. And I think it's going to be great for unification and peace. China will also suspend and remove all of its non-monetary barriers. They've agreed to do that. Well, they're very numerous. But again, to me, the biggest thing that came out of that meeting is they've agreed. Now we have to get it papered, but they've agreed to open up China. It's going to be great for everybody. And third, I'm very happy to announce that Idan Alexander, an American citizen who until recently most thought was no longer living, thought was dead, is going to be released in about 2 hours, actually. And he's going to be released before the eyes of Steve Witkoff, who has done a fantastic job. I know a lot of people that have a lot of talent. I know Steve had a lot of talent. But I know a lot of people with a lot of talent, but there's one that I thought had a special way about him, special personality, aside from being a good deal maker, had a special way about him, and it was Steve. Knew very little about the subject matter, who does, but he learned it in about 2 hours. And he's been fantastic, so I want to just thank Steve. But they're going to be releasing Idan in about 2 hours from now, or sometime today, let's say. And again, they thought he was dead just a short while ago. His parents are so happy. They're so happy. So it's, as you know, Idan's the only American citizen who's captured and held hostage by Hamas since October 7th, 2023. And he's coming home to his parents, which is really great news. I mean, to me, it's big news. They thought he was dead. So that's that. So we'll be heading there, and we'll be seeing 3 primary countries. You know all about that: Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. On Thursday's meeting with Russia and Ukraine is very important. I was very insistent that that meeting take place. I think good things can come out of that meeting. Stop the bloodshed of the horrible. It's a bloodbath. But that 5,000 more, it's really much more, I'm trying to be conservative, more than 5,000 soldiers. Russian, they're not American soldiers, they're from Russia, they're from Ukraine, but they're people. They're human souls, and they're being killed at levels that we haven't seen since the Second World War. And it's every week. A lot of drone fighting. It's a whole new form of warfare, and it's violent and vicious. And so that's it. I'd like to go back to China just for a second. They're very heavy on the fentanyl. We're charging them, as you know, 20% for the fact that they send fentanyl into our country. And they've agreed that they're going to stop that. And, you know, they'll be rewarded by not having to pay, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. So the fentanyl should stop. It comes from China. It's amazing. And comes through our southern border, comes through our northern border too, comes through Canada, and comes through our southern border, much more through the southern border. But so that's a very important subject to me, because everybody in this room has lost friends or people that have family members that have died of fentanyl. So there's a big incentive for China to stop, and I take them at their word. They're going to work on that, I think, very hard. And one thing, when they work on something, they get it done. So now I'm about to depart on a historic visit. Some of you are going with us to, as I said, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and United Arab Emirates. Before I do, I'll sign one of the most consequential executive orders in our country's history. I don't think there's ever been anything signed like this, certainly not with respect to health care, nothing even close. I'm delighted to be joined on this occasion by Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., who is doing a really good job, I have to tell you that. CMS Administrator, a friend of mine, Dr. Mehmet Oz, who is an amazing guy. You know, I was telling Bobby before, Oz had a very successful show, but it hurt his reputation. Because when you're in show business, it hurts your reputation a little bit. It's good for you, but in terms of professionalism and being a doctor, it sort of hurts your reputation. This guy went to the best schools, was the best, I mean, top of the line. Then he did a television show, became a success, made a lot of money, all that stuff, but it sort of hurt him. And you know who I compare that to? I hate to say this, but a special woman, Jeanine Pirro. She was the toughest, smartest DA, maybe in our countries, in our cities and states, history, New York. She was really tough, really sharp. Then she did a show, and people didn't think of her quite the same way. She became more of an entertainment person, like Oz. Oz is not an entertainer. He's not really an entertainer, if you know the real story. And she isn't either. She is unbelievable. She was one of the strongest district attorneys in the history of New York, highly respected, very tough. We went after the drug dealers at a level that you don't see today anymore, and hopefully she's given up a tremendous, she's leaving the #1 show on cable television, one of the #1 shows on television, period, The Five, but they've got great people left behind, but she was a big part of it. And so I equated to that. Jeanine Pirro is unbelievable. FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty McCary, with a reputation that's second to none, and the job he's doing already has been fantastic. Thank you, Marty. And Director of National Institute of Health, Jay Bhattacharya, who has been, as you know, from Stanford, so highly regarded, and have all been working with us very hard on this. And the question they would ask, being a little bit new to the government aspect of it, is why doesn't somebody fight the drug price situation, meaning equalization? There's a term, it's called equalization. Nobody wants to mention that term. And I'm not knocking the drug companies. I'm really more knocking the countries than the drug companies, because they're forced to do things. But the drug lobby is the strongest lobby in this country, they say, the drug lobby. It's between that and lawyers. And they have a lot of power. But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care. Countries where they paid a small fraction of what, for the same drug, that what we pay many, many times more for. And we'll no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma. But again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing. But they've gotten away with it, these countries. European Union has been brutal. And the drug companies actually told me stories. It was just brutal how they forced them. And European Union suing all our companies, Apple, Google, Meta. They're suing all of our companies. They end up, they have judges that are European Union-centric, and they get rewarded $15 billion, $17 billion, $20 billion, and they use that to run their operation. It's not going to happen any longer, that I can tell you. So what's been happening is we've been subsidizing other countries throughout the world, not just in Europe, throughout the world. European Union was the most difficult, from what I understand. I mean, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a businessman, very, very, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him. A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up, and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich. I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on? He said, so I checked. And it's the same box, made in the same plant, by the same company. It's the identical pill that I buy in New York. And here I'm paying $88 in London In New York, I'm paying $1,300. Now, this is a great businessman, but he's not familiar with this crazy situation that we have. But he was stunned. But it was just one of those stories. And I brought it up with the drug companies, represented by somebody who's very, very smart, good person, too. And we argued about it for about half hour. And then finally he just said, because they can't justify it, he just said, look, you got me. You got me. I can no longer they've been justifying this crap for years. They said, oh, it's research and development. Well, I said, well, research and